Hello everyone, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, and welcome to episode number 23 of the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast. Today's topic is the one about the business of Jeet Kune. The idea for today's topic kind of came up, you guys might know by now that we have a second show on I Love Jeet Kune called the Jeet Kune Dialogues, and the past two interviews, the first one was with my student Wayne Quinton down in Barbados, who runs Unified Martial Art down there, and then the second one was with my good friend and colleague Neil Colliff, who runs American Dragon here in Florida at Coral Springs. And so the idea came up somewhat as a result of some of the stuff that we touched upon in those two episodes, since Wayne and Neil are both full-time Jeet Kune school owners. So in our conversations, we talked about the concessions or the compromises that one might have to make if you want to ensure commercial success. And I know that sometimes in the world of Jeet Kune, there are people who frown upon the use of the word commercial. I can remember my teacher saying, hey, look, if you take even $1, you're commercial. And so sometimes there might have been a period where, oh, I forgot to show today's shirt. So there we go, Jun Fan Kung Fu Institute. Okay, hopefully Jenny's okay with that. So in the old days, there was somewhat of a stigma attached to the whole idea of being commercial. As I've said on previous broadcasts, in the old days, a lot in JKD was reactionary and revolutionary, and so one of my takeaways, and maybe it was just my mistake, but one of my takeaways was essentially anything that the commercial schools, as we call them, were doing, then we were going to do the opposite of that. So as soon as you start talking about making money with martial arts in general, or with Jeet Kune in particular, somebody somewhere is going to get upset, right? And I think that with some people, the reason, I guess, is because Bruce Lee is known to most people as maybe a martial arts actor, right, first and foremost. And so some of them either forget or they don't know, they're not aware of the fact that Bruce Lee was a martial arts school owner in Seattle. Then I guess we could say a co-owner in Oakland with James Lee, and then again a school owner in Los Angeles, Chinatown. So there's fraught evidence that that Bruce Lee was a martial arts businessman, right? One piece of evidence, I think, is right here in one of my favorites. You guys see me holding this book up just about every week, Jeet Kune, The Art and Philosophy, written by my teacher, Dan Inasano. So in here on page 72, I think it is it 72? No, not 72. 74 and 75, right? So this is where you can find depictions of things like Bruce Lee's membership cards for the different Jun Fan Kung Fu Institutes. There's a picture of his personal stationery, right? So that's envelopes, writing paper, even the Jeet Kune pin. And then there is the infamous, and I'm going to mess this one up now, but there's the infamous pictures of his business cards, right? So where we see Bruce Lee's depiction of his prices and what have you. So he's not somebody who was afraid to let you know how much it was going to cost to train with him. So that's right here on page 79, right, is the photograph, the infamous photograph of the business card, right? Professional consultation and instruction, $275 per hour. I wish I was charging that right now, double L. And then a 10 sessions course was $1,000, and instruction overseas was $1,000 a week plus expenses, right? So there's ample evidence that Bruce Lee had a head and or an ear for martial art business, right? And again, all of it was high class because it was designed to impress and people who are on the receiving end of it, and present him in a particular light, right? In addition, those of you who know what I've been going through with my whole loss of digital media predicament, there is a documentary that I used to own, hopefully will own again sometime soon, where they showed some of the books on Bruce Lee's bookshelf, and a number of them were books on business, books on sales and marketing, right? The Art of Selling, The Art of Creative Selling, I think was one of the titles, right? So we can put to rest the idea that Bruce Lee was anti-business, right? And even anti-martial art business. He was not. But that's not to say that he was all for the idea of having a big school with scores or maybe even hundreds of students. Again, in the Art and Philosophy book, right, on this one is page 50, I think. I'll read it to you. It says here, Bruce hated big classes. He felt that the only way to maintain the quality of instruction was to teach each student on a one-to-one basis. Now, I'm going to read that to you again because this is important. Bruce hated big classes. He felt that the only way to maintain the quality of instruction was to teach each student on a one-to-one basis. Now, I'm going to tangent off here for a second and express my thoughts on this particular aspect, right, of teaching. I disagree with Bruce Lee that one-on-one is the only way to maintain the quality of instruction. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Don't get me wrong. I understand perfectly what he's saying. But I think that it might be more accurate to say that a good way to maintain the quality of reception of the instruction is in a one-to-one setting. See, if I'm teaching 20 students at a time, because I'm teaching 20 students, there's no automatic degradation of the quality of my instruction. But because it's 20 versus 1, there might not be as, intimate a reception of what it is that I'm teaching. That quality, so I think the quality of the reception of the instruction is maintained on a higher level in the one-to-one setting, if you understand what I'm saying, right? Do you get the difference? Does that make any sense, right? But again, I ask you to keep in mind that perhaps everything at that period of time, in the 60s, throughout the 70s, and then even with some of us who date back to the early 1980s with Dan Inosanto, a lot of that was about the rejection of the classical mess, right? Referring to the approach that was used to teach the traditional martial arts, referring to that as the classical mess. So in truth, there's absolutely nothing amiss going on if you decide to pursue commercial success in Jeet Kune Do. And again, what's commercial? You take $1, that's commercial, right? So you may not be following Bruce Lee's ultimate path for the exposure of Jeet Kune Do because he chose to go the route of martial art movies, but you would be taking one of his earlier paths, which was having and running a martial arts school, right? So let's say we have that settled, okay? So let's take a look now at how we can apply aspects of Jeet Kune Do to the art of martial art business, right? So one of the questions that's floated around in marketing circles goes something like this. So let's assume that your goal is to earn $1 million. What's the best approach? Is it to try to sell 1 million people something that costs $1, right? And hope I got to read this because math is not my strong point, right? Or 100,000 people at $10, 10,000 people at $100, 1,000 people at $1,000, 100 people at $10,000. I think I already messed that up. Or one person at $1 million, right? Hopefully you get the gist of what I'm saying. Obviously, part of the answer lies in that it depends on what it is that you have to sell. If you sell Lear jets, right, at $1 million a pop, then obviously it's easier for you to, to get one client and make that $1 million, as opposed to if you're selling an app that makes your what do you call it? That makes your smartphone make a farting sound, right? Okay, so part of the strategy in your business is included what it is that you're trying to sell, right? Bruce Lee realized ultimately that an earlier passion of his, film, would be an excellent way to get his message across, which was to educate and entertain people at the same time about Jeet Kune Do. Plus, he would be following, this is my interpretation, he'd be following a standard business principle, which is create the product once and get paid for it over and over again. So you make one movie and you can now reach millions and millions of people in perpetuity because that product is there, right? Fixed in time, but the knowledge and the knowing that will come from it will be continual. You can see too, again, because since we're talking about the business of Jeet Kune Do, you can see too how Bruce Lee, as a film professional, was becoming more and more astute. The Big Boss was produced by Golden Harvest, as was Fist of Fury. So films number 1 and films number 2 were produced by Golden Harvest. Film number 3, Way of the Dragon, was what? Written, directed by Bruce Lee, and it was what? A co-production, right? Or a production of Concord, what was it called? Concord Picture Company? I forget, but Concord is definitely in the name. Because by that time, Bruce Lee had evolved into his own right as a producer. Because he knows that the real secret in making movies is to own the property, right? Own the product, and that's what the producers do, right? So I tell you this again, so that you understand that if you have any qualms, if you yourself have any qualms about going into the business of Jeet Kune Do, or if you have any criticism of people who have made Jeet Kune Do a business, then you might want to rethink your opinions and see why some people think it's absolutely okay. You're not violating any kind of Jeet Kune Do principles by going into this thing in a more professional way, because that's exactly what Sijo Bruce Lee, founder of the system, did, right? So let's talk about another marketing principle. So you hear this one bandied around in business circles, and it's the idea that you sell people what they want because nobody buys what they need until and unless it's like an emergency situation. So here in Florida, the beginning of June is the start of the hurricane season. Right? Well, nobody actually wants to go out and prepare, and buy hurricane supplies. But if or when we get the notice that there's an imminent strike, then everybody floods to Home Depot and Publix to get what they need. So the marketing philosophy or the marketing principle is that you sell people what it is that they want. So that's another way of saying you give the public what they want or what they expect. So in 1984, the Karate Kid movie was released, and that changed the landscape, again, in the world of martial art, commercial martial arts, in a big way, right? My opinion is that film, the Karate Kid, paved the path for the karate and the taekwondo and maybe even the kung fu schools to receive an additional boost in popularity because of media. And if you've listened to me talk for even a little while, you'll know that I am of the fixed opinion that people are influenced by media with or without their knowledge, right? Now, there was a significant difference of impact between the impact of this movie, right, The Karate Kid in 1984, and a predecessing blockbuster, Enter the Dragon. So Enter the Dragon is what, 1973, Karate Kid is 1984. See, in 1973, if you were inspired to get into martial arts, to try to do what Bruce Lee was doing, you probably had to be in Seattle, right, with Taki Kimura's group, in Oakland with what remained of the James Lee faction, or Los Angeles with Dan Inosanto and the Chinatown group, or maybe even in North Carolina if you were lucky enough, because I think Larry Hartsell might have been in North Carolina in '73, right? But in 1984, it was a completely different thing. In 1984, by the time the Karate Kid came along, martial arts training was a readily available commodity for the public. So everybody could get involved. But to try to get involved in Jeet Kune Do, even in 1984, it was not as easy to find a JKD establishment as it would have been to find a karate or taekwondo place, right? Okay, so now let's talk about the effort to organize the business of martial arts, right? I think in this regard, EFC, the Educational Funding Company, they might be the granddaddy because they've been around since I don't know how long. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, if I recall correctly, they were first a tuition billing company, or what you call a tuition management company, right? And then I think it was afterwards that they expanded into the business consultant part, probably right around 1984 with the success of the Karate Kid. There's another outfit called United Professionals that was founded by Greg Silva. And then in 1994, John Graydon started NAPMA, the National Association of Professional Martial Artists, right? And they've been more and more ever since then. But one thing from what I've seen that all these guys had in common is that they were all started by people in traditional martial arts. And if I remember, if I'm correct, Greg Silva was a Kempo karate guy. John Graydon was a Taekwondo guy, probably of the Junri lineage, as was the Kokinos people who started EFC up in Maryland. So we have these people who are now teaching martial artists about how to become more commercially successful. But none of them have a background in Jeet Kune Do. So they're hardly going to be able to translate their practices for the likes of a Jeet Kune Do instructor who is intent on doing things in a radical way, but still wanted to enjoy the fruits of the martial art commercial success. So what do? So to me, the thing to do, or the thing to have done, is to apply what I call the 4 tenets of Jeet Kune Do. So tenet number 1, you research your own experience for the truth, right? Okay. Now, what that research could have revealed in the 1980s and maybe even in the 1990s might no longer be true today. In other words, in the 1980s, your research may have led you to discover that there was a hunger for more and more knowledge about Jeet Kune Do. So if you had been training at Jeet Kune Do seminars with the Jeet Kune Do notables, you know, with the Dan Inosantos and the Tim Tackett's and the Larry Hartsells and the Chris Kents and the Cass Magdas and the Paul Vunaks and the Ted Wongs and whoever, then you might have been inspired to do what your heroes were doing, right? And that would lead you to open up a warehouse school. But you might not be that interested in learning much about the business of running a martial arts school because JKD, revolutionary, anti-traditional, non-classical approach, right? In the 1990s, if your school was still around and you had not become a serious student of the martial art business, then when UFC 1 hit and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu became the in thing, the next shiny object and the talk of the town, then you might have experienced a significant drop in your numbers unless you had studied business and you had learned to do what my business mentor Dan Kennedy says, build an iron cage or an iron fence around your herd, right? So this leads me to this thought. How is it that something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and now please people don't get up in arms against Dwight Woods. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, obviously a phenomenal martial art, right? Now, but it's partial because its emphasis appears to be, again, I could be wrong, appears to be on the ground fighting. So it's partial. How is it that something partial came along and supplanted something that preaches totality? How is that possible? But that's going to be a topic for another broadcast at another date. So stay tuned, right? But for now, I'll say maybe hype, which is not necessarily a bad thing, and consistent promotion, right? Okay. Tenet number 2, because this is what we're talking about, how to approach the business of Jeet Kune Do. Tenet number 2 is absorb what is useful. So if there were no Jeet Kune Do consulting companies out there, then you would have to look at what it is that they were using, what it is that they were teaching, what it is that they were advising people to do. You have to look and see what it is that's working, and then you need to interpret or reinterpret that in order to stay true to the Jeet Kune Do ideals, right? So that can bring us to what? The belt ranking system, right? This is something that Neil and Wayne and I discussed, right? And this is a topic where you will get quite a number of different opinions. There are people who will say, okay, use it only for the kids, not for the adults. There are people who will say, nah, use it for the whole school. There are people who will say, do not use any kind of belts or any kind of ranking system whatsoever. Then there are some who will say, no, you should have some kind of ranking system. And then there are some who will be a little bit more articulate, and they will say that you should have some kind of a colored ranking system. So again, what's important might be to investigate why is it that schools do use a belt system. From what I understand, it's recognition and reward, which, as I've said before, you know, kind of like the Boy Scouts, that's not an evil thing. So you have to ask yourself, is there anything wrong with recognizing and rewarding the hard work that your students are putting in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, with you at your school, right? Also, you have to ask yourself, is it or is it not true that recognition and reward is a huge contributing factor to the retention of students? Because we are talking about commercial success. So as legendary sales trainer Brian Tracy has been known to say, business owners, and that includes martial arts school owners, right, should focus every day on 2 primary tasks: creating new customers and keeping the customers that you have. So in the martial art business world, you hear them talk about that all the time. There's got to be promotion and advertising and marketing to bring people in at the top of the funnel. And then at the bottom of the funnel, you've got to be sure that not as many people are going out the back door, right? I think it was John Graydon or somebody who coined the phrase, put a lock on the back door or something, right? So that you don't have students coming in the front door, but then as many students going out the back door, because that is not a recipe for success, right? So that brings us then to tenet number 3, right? Which is reject what is useless. So let's say that you decided to adopt the belt system of your colleagues in the traditional arts, because after all, that's what everybody's telling you to do. I'll tell you that I had a conversation with, at the time he was the vice president of NAPMA, and we were talking about the whole kids enrollment thing and what have you. And I told him that it was never my intention, it was never going to be my intention to have more kids enrolled at my Jeet Kune Do school than adults, because to me, Jeet Kune Do was not primarily, not even essentially, but the things that you would have to do in order to grow your kids' enrollment, there were certain things that I wasn't willing to do. It's what I call karateizing your Jeet Kune Do school. There were certain things that I wasn't willing to do. And he said, yeah, Dwight, I kind of understand what you're talking about, but imagine if you did. And to be honest, I see what he means, because it's always easier. I think it's true. It's probably easier to enroll kids into martial arts than it is adults, right? Except unless you are a Muay Thai or MMA or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu place. And even then, I haven't studied, I haven't done any research on it. Maybe you guys can comment on that, whether or not BJJ schools experience the same phenomenon where it's more kids, more adults interested in enrolling their kids than it is adults interested in enrolling themselves, right? But in any case, we're talking about adopting the belt system, right? If you start there, you start adopting stuff, then you might be tempted to adopt some of their other methods, right? So if you learn from them that people tend to shy away or maybe even drop out when it comes to the sparring, right? Then you might decide to de-emphasize the use of sparring in your Jeet Kune Do school, which one could say is a violation of the Jeet Kune Do principle that sparring is the ultimate testing ground for technique. You see, I know for a fact that here's how this relates. Tenet number 4 is add what is specifically your own. So if we go back to researching your own experience, from what I recall, this was how things were done. Everybody warmed up together, and then you practice the basics together. So, you know, Zenkutsu Dachi, you know, so the basic stances and, you know, the reverse punch and Gedan Barai and that stuff, right? Everybody practiced the basics together. But then you would split off into different parts of the training room. And so the white belts would work on the white belt material, the yellow belts on theirs, orange belt on theirs, green, purple, brown, whatever, what have you, right? And then you would come back together towards the end of class for the sparring. And that's where, you know, the naturally aggressive people would beat up on the not so naturally aggressive people. So in looking at that approach, you might decide, well, that doesn't make any sense because people are not being taught how to spar. It really is just what they can bring to the table, right, or to the ring on their own. Well, see, but a yellow belt isn't necessarily ready to spar. So in the genius system that is Jeet Kune Do, you might end up developing sparring drills like the ones here. So in Junfan Jeet Kune Do, the textbook, right? Page 155. There's a thing here called I can't show this to you. There we go. There's a thing called progressive sparring drills, right? And then there's a whole bunch of variations, right? There's like 21 things listed here, right? So that what you're doing is, instead of having people who are at the beginning of their study engage in something in which they should engage towards not the end of their study, but after they've been around for a while, that thing known as free sparring, you create sparring drills that start to teach them progressively how to avoid being gun shy and what have you, and then step by step raises the level of their skill. And now you're not violating any Jeet Kune Do principles, right? Because you're still using sparring. You're just not going hell-bent into free sparring right in the beginning. But what you've done is to take the useful information from those martial art business consultants and reworked it and brought it into a way that would still work in Jeet Kune Do. So I'm gonna pause there. Obviously, there's more to talk about when it comes to the business of Jeet Kune Do. I'll probably do part 2 of this for next week. And I need to tell you this, right? So I messed up the scheduling of dialogue, the Jeet Kune Do dialogues, which is my second show, the episode 3. We were supposed to go on with Chris Kent, my Jeet Kune Do senior. We're supposed to go on with him at 5 o'clock this evening, but I messed that up, so we're not going to be able to pull that. And I know that's going to be disappointing for a lot of people, but hold your horses. We will be on Chris Kent and I next Thursday. The time is still to be confirmed, but I think it will be around 2 p.m. Eastern time, Miami time. And so if I don't do an episode of the dialogues, then we won't see anything until next Thursday. But if I do an episode, it'll probably be on Friday, again, around that standard time of 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., or what have you, right? I keep reminding you to check us out at I Love Jeet Kune Do, where you can find volume 1 of the Quick Skill series. And I keep promising you that the YouTube channel and the SoundCloud channel are coming. They are coming. Again, like I said at the top of the show, those of you who know what I've been going through with the digital media loss, right? You'd understand why that's been delayed somewhat, right? So, okay, thanks for tuning in, guys and girls. So until next time, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. Y'all have a good rest of the day. Take care.